The biggest independent professional wrestling show in U.S. history is now in the books, and that was All In. The first edition, perhaps of more than one, we'll see. But All In was last night from the Sears Center in Chicago, Illinois. The show sold out, or at least the initial allotment of tickets sold out in under 30 minutes. I heard on the during the broadcast last night, I think it was Excalibur who mentioned a few times, a total attendance somewhere in the range of 10,400, I believe, was the attendance that they were quoting as far as who was in the building last night. And this was a big weekend for a lot of people, right? There were a lot of people who maybe don't care. Maybe they're just, they watch WWE or they just watch New Japan or whatever it may be, and they just, this wasn't an event that appealed to them. But to me, I never really understood, because there was also a lot of people going into this show who were sort of hating on it, and I never really if you're hating on the actual show itself, I'm not talking about all the other little ancillary events around it per se, but the show itself, I never really got why people would be hating on it, because it's nothing but a positive for wrestling when you have a show that drums up this much sort of interest going into it. Whether or not it can live up to it always is a question. And judging from the reaction last night, I think most people would say that at least their expectations were met, if not exceeded. Others might disagree. But there was absolutely nothing negative about this show being a success. And I don't know that anybody with, a decent-sized brain in their head would want this show to fail. Because it's always nice to have options like this. It doesn't mean that a new promotion will spring eternal from this. It could just be a one-off. It could be a one-and-done type of thing. It could be a once-a-year thing. It could be the so-called indie WrestleMania, whatever you want to call it. But this was a really, I think, positive thing that happened last night, and really this whole weekend. People were having fun. People were, talking about all the different events that were going on and who might show up. And yeah, there was a feeling of excitement. There really was. There was a feeling of excitement at a time when, frankly, there isn't a whole lot of excitement to go around when it comes to WWE. And I bring them up because they are still the dominant product, whether people like it or not. You listen to any podcast or any sort of big stories each week in the world of wrestling. The fact is that the world of wrestling revolves around the biggest company, and the biggest company is WWE. So you had a lot of people going into the show making comparisons about how All In is going to topple WWE, and this could be, the beginning of some real competition for them. And for me, it was never really about that, because there is nobody who will compete on that scale with WWE. You don't have to compete with WWE. You just have to provide a viable alternative option, and I think if anything, what last night showed is that the independent wrestling scene right now is as healthy as it's been in this country, at least. I know there's been a big boom going on in the UK for a while, but in this country, I don't remember another period where, in totality, independent wrestling seemed to be as strong as it is right now. This event was sort of almost the culmination of that, because it brought talent in from, and not just legends, to make appearances at the StarCast convention and all that. I mean, it really brought everybody into the Chicago area. But it brought in talent from promotions from all over the world. It was a collaborative effort. You had talent from Impact Wrestling. You had talent from Ring of Honor. You had talent from New Japan. You had talent from PWG. You had talent from all over the country, all over the world, AAA in Mexico, British promotions, probably Australian, all coming together in one weekend, and that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. And look, the weekend started with this StarCast event that was being hosted by Conrad Thompson, and I've been to WrestleCon. I've done interviews for Fight TV on the floor of WrestleCon. This looked to be, going in, just a way more ambitious version of WrestleCon. I think, frankly, Conrad probably, and I think he's even said this, bit off more than he could chew, and has said that he is unlikely to ever do another one of these ever again. So everybody's saying, oh, he's going to do a StarCast 2 and 3. Look, who knows, right? But if he doesn't, I'm sure somebody else will, believe me. If he has no interest in doing this, especially if this thing in the end ended up making money. And I don't know the financials of how this event turned out for them. I certainly hope it was worth their while, looking at some of the prices that were being charged, but if it made money, believe me, there will always be somebody there who will do another one of these. But again, I don't really understand the hate that I saw from some, websites and such, because so long as there's a market for it, and if you have people who are willing to pay, and it's a place where wrestlers can go sell their merch and make money, I don't know. Call me crazy. I see that as a positive, not a negative. And from what I saw, people seem to have fun with it and enjoy themselves. And when you build a whole weekend around an event like All In, it just makes it feel like that much of a bigger deal. I don't know that All In would have been quite as, or felt quite as big without the whole StarCast thing built around it. Building an entire weekend of events around it. And it's smart, because think about it. Fans are a lot more likely to fly themselves out for an event if you don't live in the Chicago area. If you live out of the country, you have people from out of the country flying in. They're a lot more likely to do that when they know that there's a ton of other things going on, and there's not just one show on one night at one location. They learned from the WrestleMania weekend model, and they made it their own for one weekend, completely independent of WWE. There was no WrestleMania in Chicago last night to piggyback off of, or this weekend. This was their own, and I think, for no other reason, they deserve a lot of credit for making it work the way that they did. So they had the all-in weigh-ins on Friday night. They tried to give it a big fight feel, like something you would see before a big boxing match or a big, MMA fight. Probably, I guess, in watching it, I would say probably the biggest news coming out of it was Kenny Omega being asked whether or not he will be at the Madison Square Garden show next April. And he gave a very political answer. He said, he would very much like to be there. He wants to be there. It's obvious, though, just based on the way he answered or did not answer this question, that he's either going to WWE, he knows there's a good chance he may end up there, or that he is seriously contemplating going there and does not know truly in his heart what he wants to do at this point. It's going to come down to whatever, money offer is made to him. Of course, there's always this pact that Cody talked about. We're all going to make, the next move together. And I don't see Cody going back to WWE anytime soon, so I don't know what that means. But, he said he wants to physically be there no matter what, whether he's on the card that night or not. He said he would like to, even if just being a fan in the crowd. I've said that I hope he does not sign just yet with WWE, at least not before that show. Because he and the Bucks, it just wouldn't feel right, I think, to have that show without them on there, because so much, I think, of this hype, just like All In, right? So much of this hype that's been built around it are built around a certain number of figures from the Bullet Club. And it would just, I don't know, it just would feel weird if they're going to go into this big Madison Square Garden sellout and make such a big deal about it, and what a monumental event it is. And at that time, the Bucks and Kenny are, under contract to Vince McMahon. They'll make whatever decision they feel they need to make. I think it would be cool if they could at least be part of that show. And also, selfishly, I just have, I want to see Omega and Ibushi in the main event. I have tickets to that show, so I'd like to see that as the main event. So that's kind of a selfish thing on my part. But then last night, it was time for the actual event. After months of hype, it was sink or swim, and I think they knocked it out of the park. I really do. I thought it was an excellent show. It was by no means a perfect show. It was not without its flaws, but it was a breath of fresh air compared to some of the stuff I've seen, put out on pay-per-view in recent months. This was a show that had something for everyone. So, if you like great wrestling, you had a lot of really good wrestling on this show. You had some great wrestling, so you certainly had that. If you like, what I call garbage wrestling, which basically the weapons and the hardcore stuff, you had some of that, especially with the Hangman Adam Page, Joey Janela street fight. If you like a lot of cameo appearances and names from the past popping up, you had that. If you like some of the goofiness and the silliness that goes along with pro wrestling, you certainly had plenty of that between the Battle Royal on the pre-show and the Joey Ryan stuff, which I will say I hated. That is the one part of the show I just did not like. So, I mean, the closest thing I would compare this show to, somebody asked me on Twitter, buy or sell, ECW One Night Stand 2005, we're all in. Because, I've talked before about how One Night Stand 05 is probably the most fun I've ever had watching a wrestling show or a wrestling pay-per-view in my life. And, to this day, it's one of my big wrestling regrets. I wrestle with regret over the fact that I did not go to that show because I'm so freaking close. I'm a train ride away from where that One Night Stand show was in 05. And I didn't go. And I know people who did, and they said it was like one big freaking party atmosphere there. I wouldn't say this show was better or I had more fun with this than that, but it's probably the closest comparison that I can make. I mean, it was this just was a lot of fun to sit back and watch and enjoy, and it had a nice variety of things to get into. If I had to go 1 to 10, scale of 1 to 10, where would this show rank last night? I would go 8. I would go 8 for this show. For a 5-hour show, put it this way, there was way more to like than not to like. And based on these Twitter poll results, you guys seem to be in agreement with me on that. I did put the poll up last night. Last I checked, and it's only been, I don't even think it's been, probably as I'm recording this, it's only been about 9 hours or so maybe since the poll went up. Over 3,400 votes so far, which is a lot especially for a non-WWE show. I haven't done too many polls like this for any non-WWE shows, but I ain't never seen a result like this before. So that's a lot of votes. 63% thumbs up, 5% thumbs down, 32% did not watch. I did cave recently, and I started adding that as an option because enough people were complaining about it. I guess, with these Twitter polls, you can't see the results unless you can vote. So people seem to be pretty happy that I've added that option. But I wanted that option here, too, because I wanted to get a sense of who watched this thing and who didn't. Now, 32 is kind of a high number. But I would say on the whole, those are pretty damn good numbers for this show, if it's any small little indicator of sort of the wider reaction to what people thought. They opened with the 0-hour pre-show on WGN America. They had an hour on television to promote the main show and put a couple of matches on. Cody and the Bucks came out at the very beginning to open. They had their little introduction, welcome people. They had, I put pyro in quotes here because I don't know if this was intended or if this was sort of a botch or what, but they said, hey, we should have pyro. And there was some pyro that went off, but it was sort of like the pyro you would see at a birthday party. It wasn't the kind of pyro that you would, I guess pyro can be expensive, as we all know. There's a reason why we don't see pyro on TV every week anymore. So I'm sure they were already well over budget, but they gave us some sparklers and some flames and such. And they introduced Road Warrior Animal. Talk about random. Until I realized they were in Chicago, and then I understood the significance of why they would want Road Warrior Animal, who rode out on the side. He wasn't on the stage, but he kind of rode out on a motorcycle on the side and waved. And I think that was the last we saw of him. He wasn't even in the Battle Royal that came up or anything like that. So we had an announce crew of Ian Riccaboni, who handles the play-by-play for Ring of Honor, Don Callis, who you all know, and Excalibur, one of the founding fathers of Pro Wrestling Guerrilla. They handled the announce duties largely for the evening. I mean, they had a sort of a rotating crew of different guest announcers at times. Some were better than others. Justin Roberts served as one of the 2 ring announcers for the night. Good to hear his voice again. The other was Bobby Cruz, who's been ring announcing for Ring of Honor, as far back as I've been going to their shows, and I used to go to those shows a lot, starting in like 06, I'd say, 06, 07. And I'm sure he's been with them a lot longer than that. So he had the call for some of the matches. I thought visually the show looked great, production-wise. The stage, and it was not by any means a perfect production. There were, sometimes the camera shots were sort of wonky. They did have the, oh my goodness, I forgot what they call it. You see them on the WWE shows, the camera that sort of sweeps in and gets those sweeping shots. There's a name for it. It just popped out of my head. I was impressed by that. I didn't know if, what the production would look like for this show, but they had some of those sweeping camera angles where they got this sort of large, wide shot of the crowd, and the place was packed, so it looked great visually on television. I don't know if you were there. You can chime in on this, but it did not seem like there were very many, if any, empty seats. So whatever they did, and again, they say it was a legit sellout. Whatever they did, they certainly did a good job of packing that place in and making it look like they were filled to capacity with standing room only. But I still think overall, visually it looked really good. The one thing I got to call them out on, though, is the miking of the crowd. Everyone in the building said the crowd was loud all night. I could tell that they were loud for the majority of the matches. You could see them moving and clapping and standing and applauding, and it just did not always come across that way on television. You could see people cheering and standing and making noise, and yet it sounded very muted on TV for a lot of the matches. And it's too bad because I do think it hurt some of the matches. So that was the one kind of big production miscue, I think, on their part, is that they just did not do that good of a job of miking that crowd, because they could have come across a hell of a lot hotter on TV than they did. I think the standout performers of the night, I made a little list here. I just wrote 3 names down. I wanted to try to keep it to 3. There were a lot of people, I think, who had pretty good nights for themselves. But I wrote down here Pentagon, Flip Gordon, and Chelsea Green. And I actually wrote Britt Baker after that as well. But those are the 3 names that I thought they had star-making performances here on this show. Pentagon did not need to resort to the blood and the violence and the weapons and everything that we're used to seeing him in. I mean, just last week we saw him on 2 different TV shows for 2 different promotions. One a Mexican death match, and the other one was a last man standing match. And he bled, like a pig in both matches. And that's, typically the kind of matches that we see, or that I see, Pentagon in. He didn't have to do that here. He had a straight-up wrestling match, a straight-up, frickin' war with Kenny Omega. And I think he had probably one of the best matches of his life last night. Just one of the best straight-up wrestling matches of his career. Flip Gordon, same thing. He didn't win. He did finally get booked. But he didn't win, but he had the spotlight on him in a way that he's never had before. And I thought he made the most of it. Same for Chelsea. Chelsea Green. She really impressed me in that women's match. Like I said, Britt Baker did too, but Chelsea just has a certain charisma about her that I think it would make her a great fit for the women's division in NXT or on the WWE main roster. But let's get into this here. The pre-show open, Frankie Kazarian and Scorpio Sky, 2 members of SCU, SoCal Uncensored, against the Briscoe brothers, Jay and Mark. Non-title, even though they are the reigning Ring of Honor Tag Team Champions. We had Scorpio Sky out there dressed like Apollo Creed. He had the American flag shorts and jacket, and the Briscoes played heel here in this match, or at least they were treated by the fans. It sounded to me like they were the heels. We had Scorpio Sky giving Mark Briscoe a Rana off the top rope, Kaz hitting a Tornado DDT. I'm just trying to highlight some of the more sort of memorable moves of these matches. I'm not going to go move by move with everything. You kind of get the picture here. But we had the Jay Driller and the Froggy Bow, which is usually the way the Briscoes finish off their opponents. But Scorpio Sky made the last-minute save for his partner, which was great because that was the one part of that match, I think, where people truly bought into it that the match was over. And it wasn't. Briscoe's called for the Doomsday Device at the end, but when Briscoe came off the top, Kaz caught him in midair and turned it into a power slam for a pin. I thought that finish was great. I thought this was an excellent choice for an opener to the show. Maybe it should have opened the main portion of the event and not the pre-show, but as an opener, you really can't do better than that. It was a hot match. People were into it. A lot of good action. And I thought that was a great choice for an opener. That led to the over-budget Battle Royal, with the winner earning a match with Jay Lethal later in the night, challenging him for the Ring of Honor World title. Former Ring of Honor champion Dalton Castle joined the crew on commentary for the match. Bully Ray was shown coming down through the crowd, joining the fray. So I know Bully Ray was there. He was doing stuff at StarCast as part of the Busted Open show on Sirius, which I know he's a co-host for them now. And, even the House of Glory show, that I was just at a few weeks ago. They're promoting another big show coming up on October 5th, in Queens. And Bully Ray made a surprise appearance on the House of Glory show that I was just at to promote a match that he's having on October 5th with Sami Callihan, which I'm sure is going to be crazy. So Bully is making the rounds here. Bully has become quite the he's become quite the independent wrestling sensation here. But here's the list of people in this battle royal. At least initially, there were some surprises along the way. We had Moose, Brandon Cutler, Trent Beretta, Chuck Taylor, Chucky T, Rocky Romero, Cheeseburger, Hurricane Helms, Ethan Page, Tommy Dreamer, Jimmy Jacobs, Punishment Martinez, Billy Gunn, and his son Austin, wearing his father's old tights, Marco Stunt, who I've never seen before, but Marco Stunt is a very small man. He is apparently 22 years old, does not look a day over 12. We had Brian Cage, Colt Cabana, Jordan Grace, Jordan Grace being the only, I think, the sole female entrant in this battle royal. So that's who we started out with. Bully immediately attacks this masked luchador outside the ring before the match even starts, power bombs this poor dude through a table. So he's wiped out immediately. We have Moose in the battle royal here, running wild for a bit. Everybody decides to gang up on him, dump him out onto the apron. That led to Marco Stunt, who does not look a day over 7, drop-kicking Moose to the floor and eliminating him. I guess this was sort of this was their Maven Undertaker Royal Rumble moment, I guess, on a much, much, much smaller scale. I don't know how many people will remember this moment in a week, let alone years from now, but I certainly have not forgotten not just Maven eliminating Undertaker in that Royal Rumble, but also the disgusting chair shot that Maven took to the head immediately after, that I'm sure he would like to forget and probably has forgotten because his brains were scrambled that night. I don't know that he would remember much. So anyway, Marco Stunt took care of Moose. We had Cage eliminating Cheeseburger, as if you couldn't tell just by looking at him. I don't think he's been eating too many cheeseburgers lately. We had Cage and Punishment Martinez. They had a big man exchange, big man brawl in the middle of the ring. It saw Cage hit a Rana on Martinez. I'm watching Cage here, and Cage is a really talented guy, and he's doing well for himself on Lucha Underground and Impact Wrestling. I'm watching him here, and I'm like, oh man, this guy's just. He's just jacked to the... I mean, he moves around very well, again, for a guy his size, but he looked just like he was... If you put a pin in him last night, he was going to explode. Even more so than usual. But anyway, he hit a Rana on Punishment Martinez. Martinez used the head scissors on him. Hurricane Helms hit choke slams to Martinez and to Cage. That got some of the biggest pops of anything on the entire show. Tommy Dreamer was in there wearing the old American Dream polka dot pants. Thank God it was pants. And he was using trash cans and cookie trays, and Bully Ray eliminated Dreamer, which is very appropriate given all the fat jokes that he is constantly making on Twitter at Tommy Dreamer's expense. I don't think he'll let Dreamer hear the end of this. Billy Gunn, like I said, he was in there with his son Austin. They got to work some spots together, not against one another. There was a moment in the match where I was almost positive that Billy was going to throw his son out of the ring, which actually I think would have been a really cool spot. And then he could have told his son to suck it, and then he could have gotten dumped out, but they didn't do that. But they were sort of teaming up, and they were working together in this match. He is a spitting image of his father, right down to the way he sells moves. It is scary. When I interviewed Billy in Orlando, I mentioned WrestleCon a little bit earlier. And I had the chance to interview a whole bunch of different people when I was on the floor at WrestleCon last year in Orlando, and Billy Gunn was one of those people. And in the middle of the interview, I asked him about his son because I had just read about his son wrestling his first match, and he teamed up with his father, so I wanted to ask him about it. And he lit up. Billy Gunn lit up like a Christmas tree when I asked about his son, and he said, as a matter of fact, he's right over here, and he brought him over. And that was the first time I saw his son in person, when he brought him over to be part of the interview. And I just remember looking at him and just going, holy shit. It's like, it was eerie. It really was. It was very eerie how much he looked like him. But anyway, Jimmy Jacobs was in there wearing a dress, because why not? He planted a wet one on Billy Gunn, so Billy got rid of him. Austin eliminated Punishment Martinez. And then Bully immediately dumped out Austin Gunn. Papa Gunn got a measure of revenge by hitting Bully with a famouser. Cage then dumped Billy Gunn very hard to the floor. That looked like it sucked. Bully eliminated Marco Stunt, who, if I did not already mention it, does not look a day over the age of 5. He may, in fact, be a fetus. I cannot confirm this. We got a sequence with Cage and Jordynne Grace, where Cage buckle bombed her. She fought back. She was able to power bomb Brian Cage, who is a very large man, and eliminate him to a massive pop from the crowd. And then she and Colt Cabana worked together to give Bully Ray the wazap headbutt off the top rope. Bully ended up tossing her out of the ring, that is, and left him alone with Colt Cabana. So it came down to Bully Ray and Colt Cabana, who was very over here in his hometown of Chicago, which is why I assume they gave him this little moment here in this battle royal. Bully ended up tossing him out of the ring, and it looked like Bully Ray was going to challenge Jay Lethal for the Ring of Honor World Championship, which I knew was not going to be the match. It was just a matter of who's left. Obviously, somebody else is going to come out. Something is going to happen. On a show that is supposed to be designed by, almost like by the fans for the fans, right? By the marks for the marks, call it whatever you want. They were not going to have Bully Ray challenging for the Ring of Honor World title. And sure enough, into the ring came the masked luchador, who Bully had powerbombed through a table outside the ring at the beginning of the match. And he suddenly reemerged, and he ripped off the mask to reveal Flip Gordon. To a big ovation, he eliminates Bully Ray, and Flip Gordon wins the over-budget Battle Royal. And I said it would be Flip in the bear costume, but it turned out to be Flip in the lucha costume. So I was close enough. I thought this Battle Royal was a lot of fun. I mean, there were some rocky moments in there, but it was one of the best Battle Royals that I've seen in a while. Not ever or anything like that, but it was a lot of fun. I really can't find much fault with this Battle Royal. Everybody had their own little moment, whether it was the little Marco Stunt, the fetus, or Bully Ray, or Billy Gunn and his son, or Brian Cage and Jordynne Grace, or Hurricane with the chokeslam spots. Everybody had their own little spot, or their own story, or their own chance to shine and get a nice reaction from the crowd. And of course Flip at the end. And the story going into the show is that Flip Gordon was not booked, and Cody Rhodes did not want him booked, and he was not going to be part of the show. And it was just a matter of, okay, obviously he'll find his way on. How will he find his way on? And the most obvious way, to me, was through this Battle Royal. So I thought the way this was laid out was actually very well done, and the right man won. And that went immediately into the pay-per-view itself. Now, I ordered the show through Fight TV, not traditional pay-per-view or Honor Club. I'm not an Honor Club member for ROH. But I had a lot of issues at first where the show had already been purchased. I was watching this, with my brother. He's hitting the button. And it's at that screen where it's supposed to retrieve and then begin playing, and it was stuck. Like the bar wasn't going anymore. It was just sitting there. So we went back and forth, same thing. I go on Twitter, other people are having problems as well, and I don't remember who it was, but somebody suggested, hey, if you stream it from your phone and cast it to the television, it should work fine. So I tried that, and boom, we were off to the races. And so that worked, and the feed for me was fine for the rest of the night. Unfortunately, I missed the first half of the opener, with Matt Cross taking on MJF, Maxwell Jacob Feinstein, who wrestles for MLW. He's also the reigning CZW champion. So I missed the first half of this, and there really, as far as the match itself, what I saw, not a whole lot to say about it. What I saw was good. I wouldn't say the most exciting opener necessarily for the pay-per-view portion. It wasn't as good of an opener as the tag team match was on 0 Hour. But Matt Cross won with the Shooting Star Press. I saw Kurt Hawkins tweeting about MJF. I know he was excited. He helped train MJF. Believe me, I'm sure there was a lot of WWE talent watching this show, or who will go back and watch this show. They have a lot of friends and significant others who worked the show last night, so believe me. It's not just a matter of internet wrestling fans being the only ones interested in this show. There were a lot of wrestlers from all over the industry who had their eyes locked on this show last night, believe me. We had Sean Mooney backstage. If that's not reason enough to watch this show, I don't know what is. He was backstage interviewing the NWA champion Nick Aldis about his match with Cody. I weep for the young WWE fans these days, today, who know not of men like Sean Mooney when it comes to backstage interviews. All they know of are people like Dasha Bot. Although I guess they would know Renee Young. Renee Young does handle a lot of backstage interviews. And Renee is very good, but she's no Sean Mooney. We had Christopher Daniels one-on-one against Stephen Amell, representing Bullet Club, star of the TV show Arrow. He also once teamed up with Neville, who was nowhere to be found on this show, unfortunately. He teamed with Neville in a SummerSlam match a few years ago against Stardust and Wade Barrett. Now think about this. That was 3 years ago at SummerSlam, which isn't really that long ago, and none of those four men are with the company anymore. I mean, Amell was never really with them. It was a one-time appearance, but all four of those men, no longer involved with WWE. So Jerry Lynn was the special referee here. They showed John Mayer sitting at ringside. It's kind of random. Amell is actually pretty good given his experience level. Obviously, he's an athletic guy. He can fly around and do things that the average non-wrestler, I'm sure, can't do. Keeps himself in decent shape, and he's a wrestling fan. So I respect him for that. He hit a Falcon Arrow in this match. He hit a Van Terminator at a different point in the match that I didn't think he was going to hit. But he was able to connect. It looked good. That being said, there was a lot of sloppiness here from both guys, not just Amell, which was surprising. It's not something you're used to seeing in a Christopher Daniels match, but Daniels ended up laid out on a table at one point that had been set up earlier outside the ring. And Amell took to the skies. He climbed all the way up top and dove off for an elbow drop. And Daniels rolled off the table and Amell crashed and burned through the table. That friggin' table exploded on impact. The fans started a Broken Arrow chant, which was funny. Jerry Lynn, the terrible referee that he is, he grabbed both men and rolled them back inside one by one, which is not the job of a referee. Who the hell does this guy think he is? So Daniels is arguing with him, basically saying the same thing. What the hell do you think you're doing? And Lynn pulls his shirt off, and he's beating his chest like he's some tough guy. He shoves Daniels backwards, and he falls into a roll-up by Amell for a near fall. Daniels ends up winning with the best moonsault ever, which kind of surprised me. I thought Amell was going to win this here, but I get it. You defer to the veteran here, and I thought this was good. This was not a great match, but I thought this was good. Especially when you consider the experience level of Amell, this could have really fallen apart. He could have gotten blown up, and it didn't really seem like that happened here. So I enjoyed this. People were into it, and he shook hands with Daniels when the match was over. They both showed respect to one another. We had Emma, Tennille Dashwood. I guess we should use her real name now. I still call her Emma. We had Emma and Mandy Leone, both part of the Women of Honor division now in ROH. They provided guest commentary for the very next match, which was a Four Corners match with Tessa Blanchard, who was escorted halfway to the ring by her family, by her father, obviously, Tully Blanchard, and her stepfather, Magnum T.A. How crazy is that? Magnum and Tully, back in the NWA days, right? The Crockett days, they had some classic battles back then. Remember the cage match for the United States Championship? And they are technically both her father. So how about that? Anyway, Tessa, Madison Rayne, Chelsea Green, and Britt Baker. Baker came out to Adam Cole's old theme music. For those who don't know, they've been dating for a while now. That was no coincidence. Chelsea has been dating Zack Ryder, hence her use of the broski boot. She did the woo-woo-woo and the boot in the corner at one point during this match, which made for I would say, a semi-awkward moment with Emma on commentary. I realized in that moment, I said, it is kind of odd that we have Emma on commentary here, calling calling a woo broski boot spot for Chelsea Green. Yeah, she obviously dated Ryder right before he started dating Chelsea, so small world. Chelsea worked the Laurel Van Ness gimmick here in this match. This was all action. It was actually one of my favorite matches of the night, honestly. I think I had this as my fourth favorite match. I think the fourth best match of the night, behind the Kenny Omega match, the NWA title match, and the Battle Royal. I won't say best, because everyone's going to have their own opinion. They're going to think I'm crazy for putting the frickin' Battle Royal ahead of the Okada match. But if I made my own personal list of favorite matches on the card, this would probably be number 4 behind those other 3. Chelsea hit a Canadian Destroyer on Tessa for a near fall. I don't like that move being used as a near fall. Like, at least in Lucha Underground, they call it the Mexican Destroyer on that show. At least when you see, like, Pentagon hit it, usually he hits a combination of them. He hits 2 of them, and then he transitions immediately into his finish. So he beats people with it, technically. I think, actually, this move, I think the Canadian Destroyer was used more than once for a near fall on this show. Which I did not like. But anyway, Tessa hit the Hammerlock DDT on Chelsea for the win. It looked like one of the women was trying to break, maybe Britt was trying to break up the fall, but got there too late. I think that was the point, is that they were trying to break it up, but just did not make it in time. But it kind of looked like, I feel like it hurt the finish a little bit, because people thought maybe it was like a ref botch. It wasn't supposed to be the finish. Somebody was late on the cue. Even though I don't think that was the point. I think it went exactly the way it was supposed to go. But still, I thought this was really good. All 4 women embraced one another when the match was over and raised each other's hands. And they got a standing ovation from the crowd. We had Cody taking on Nick Aldis for the NWA World Championship. I love the way they filmed the entrances for this match. They followed each man with their respective entourage from the back, like it was an MMA fight. We had Cody Rhodes escorted to the ring by his wife Brandy, his dog Pharaoh, Diamond Dallas Page, Tommy Dreamer in his polka dots, and Glacier. What a fucking crew that is. Holy shit. Oh my goodness. Cody got I'll say this much. Cody got a superstar reaction coming out to the ring. This is the biggest reaction that this guy has gotten ever in his entire life. He felt like a true superstar. You know, there's always, I've gotten questions sometimes, do you see Cody as a main eventer? Do you see him as a real headliner? And up until recently, no, I really didn't. And, still you can ask that question. But on this night, in front of this crowd, with the way they put this whole entrance and the way it was filmed, it felt like a really big deal. And he felt like a really big deal coming out in a way that I've never really viewed him before. So in that respect, mission accomplished. I thought they did a good job. Nick Aldis was escorted to the ring by Samuel Shaw. I'm old enough to remember when he used to be obsessed with Christy Hemme on Impact. So he was out there. Wearing the gloves, too. I mean, that's, like, for a while there in Impact, he started doing, like, the serial killer gimmick, like he was Dexter or something, and he started wearing the latex gloves. I guess he still is, because he was out there wearing gloves. Sean Daivari was out there as well. It would become very clear soon enough why he was out there. Tim Storm, who Aldis defeated to win the NWA title. And Mr. Global Force Gold himself, Jeff Jarrett, all escorting Nick Aldis down to the ring. Earl Hebner was the special referee for the match. These guys got a standing ovation before they even touched. This had a big fight feel to it, with all those, 10 pounds of gold videos that Billy Corgan and Dave Lagana have been working on now for months. In the lead up to this. I said this on the show last week. I can't say enough good things about the job they've done to try to make this feel like a big deal. Part of their job in rehabbing the name and the image and the brand of the NWA, because let's be honest, it was a dead brand. Billy Corgan bought a dead brand. And Billy Corgan is, he's obviously a longtime wrestling fan and has an affinity for that brand and those initials, and he wanted to buy it, and he wanted to do his part to try to make it mean something again. Because it was a dead brand. It did not have the value or the name recognition that it did 20, 30, 40 years ago. And frankly, I don't think it ever will. you can never get back to the way it was 30 or 40 years ago, but he is doing his damnedest to make people care about the NWA again. You know, he wants people to believe that those three initials have value. And I think that to that end, they've done, I think, an admirable job with that video series on YouTube of trying to make people, you know, care again about it. Now, you add to that the story that they told leading into the match of Cody trying to win the championship that his father once held 3 times, actually, the NWA World Heavyweight title. Based on the crowd reaction here with this audience, I would say that it worked. The work itself, I thought, was solid. You know, Cody's had better matches with Omega and Okada, but I'd say that this was the best match I've ever seen Nick Aldis have. Certainly the biggest match, the match with the most heat, going back to his days in TNA as Magnus, that I've ever seen him have, and that includes the matches he had against Kurt Angle and Sting and people like that. This was the biggest match of his career. The big spot was Cody coming off the top rope to the floor, and Aldis catches him with a forearm shot on the way down. I don't know if it was a forearm or an elbow. It may have been an elbow. So Cody is down, right? He's face down on the ground for a very long time. Earl Hebner goes out there to check on him. He throws up the dreaded X sign to make you think that we have a legitimate injury here. And this match, and the announcers are saying, this match could be over. This could be it. DDP, he comes back down to check on Cody. He gets a yoga chant, which I'm sure just fucking enraged him to no end, because he absolutely hates it when people call what he does yoga. Anybody who has talked to him, who has interviewed him, who has seen him do interviews about DDP yoga, and you guys know what I'm talking about. It's not just like a little tongue-in-cheek joke. He fucking hates when people call it yoga. He gets hot about that. So while I'm sure he appreciated the sentiment, I'm sure on the inside he was burning up. Daivari comes down. He shoves DDP backwards. Then Daivari gets into the ring. He starts yelling at Earl Hebner. DDP gets into the ring. You know what's coming next. He spins Daivari around, lays him out with a diamond cutter. Now, when they showed Cody, he was busted open at this point, okay? The thing is, they showed his face a couple of minutes earlier, well after he had already been, you know, hit in the face by Aldis, and he had been laying out there for a while. And there wasn't a mark on him. The first time they showed him, he looked kind of loopy, right, when DDP first came out to check on him. But, you know, there was no cut or blood or anything like that. And here, all of a sudden, he's bleeding. Inexplicably. And I think what happened here is that he may have forgotten his blade. Because it clearly, I mean, obviously it was an intentional blade job. He was going for the visual of his father, face all bloody, winning the championship. That, you know, I mean, that's the whole reason his hair is blonde now. I'm thinking he either forgot his blade, or maybe the plan was for DDP to come out and to blade for him. And that's why things took so long, because it almost felt like they were stalling here for a while. And it was very odd that he was not bleeding, and then suddenly he was. Maybe it just took a while for all that blood to rush to his head. I don't know. So anyway, Cody is bleeding now, and the match rolls on, as Michael Cole would say. Cody got Aldis in the figure 4 leg lock, but he makes the ropes. Aldis hit a pile driver. He climbed up to the top rope. Brandy now gets in the ring. She's very concerned about her husband's well-being. She's begging Aldis not to do it, not to come off the top rope, and she lays her body across her husband to protect him like a shield. This kind of reminded me of when Lita did that for Matt Hardy. If you remember that segment on Raw back in 2001, which I'm sure WWE would love for you to forget about, where Stone Cold and Triple H beat the piss out of the Hardy Boys and Lita. There was that one moment where Lita threw her body over Matt to protect him, and Austin was like, fuck this. And he just bashed the shit out of her with a steel chair. This wasn't quite that extreme, but it was sort of a similar thing. Aldis came off the top rope anyway with an elbow right onto Brandy, although they played it up like he didn't mean to do it. He was already in flight, sort of before she threw her body over Cody. So that got him some massive heat with the crowd. Cody made a comeback, hit the disaster kick, crossroads for a near fall. Aldis attempted a sunset flip, but Cody sat down, hooked the legs forward for the 1-2-3, and got the dramatic pinfall. Place exploded. The old SummerSlam 92 finish from Wembley with Bulldog and Bret Hart. Cody starts crying. He's holding the championship. Earl Hebner presents him with the title, and this was a great match. I mean, if not a bit overbooked, great payoff and a great call, I think, by Corgan to put the belt on Cody. It just made sense in terms of visibility for the NWA to put that championship on Cody at a time when his stock has never been higher. I don't care what you think about Cody Rhodes. You are a fool if you cannot bring yourself to at least admit that his stock, even going back to his days in WWE, his stock has never been higher than it is right now. There's more of a buzz around this guy and his whole crew than there ever has at any other point in his career, whatever character or gimmick he may have been portraying at that time. And if he's actually going to be a traveling champion for the NWA the way that Aldis was, he could do wonders, I think, for the credibility of that belt with that audience. So I think it's a very smart move. We had Hangman Adam Page and Joey Janela with Penelope Ford in his corner in a Chicago street fight. If WWE does not make an offer to Adam Page, I would be stunned, and they're out of their minds. I'm not saying that he should accept it. I'm just saying this guy, he looks like a star. He's 6'5". I didn't know how tall he was. I thought maybe he was like 6'2". I looked it up. This guy, apparently, unless this is his worked height, but apparently he's 6'5", 265, 275. He's a big dude, and he's only 27 years old. But he looks like a star. So I would be very surprised if they didn't make a play for him in these next few months if the rumors are true and his contract is up very soon with the rest of the gang from Bullet Club, except Marty Scurll. I believe Marty Scurll is all locked up for next year. I've only become familiar with Joey Janela through these spring break events that he's been doing, and I haven't gone to any of them. I haven't watched any of them. I'm aware of them. I know he just did another one in Brooklyn. And I get that he's more of a brawler. This was my first sort of real exposure to him as far as his matches and his work is concerned. This was the obligatory hardcore match of the night. Again, a little something for everyone on this show. The highlight was them using an actual Cracker Barrel at ringside. They were one of the sponsors for the show, and there was, right in the corner there by the barricade, there was an actual Cracker Barrel. Adam Page gave him a burning hammer onto a ladder bridge outside the ring. Why would you do such a thing? Why would you do that? Page pulled out a bag from underneath the ring, and before he could take out whatever was inside that bag, Penelope Ford jumped him, and in these 30 seconds, they had this little sequence back and forth with her and Adam Page. In these 30 seconds, she looked more impressive than Dana Brooke has looked in the 5 years that she has been employed by WWE. Or, I'll do you one better, in the 10 years that Rosa Mendez worked for that company. Which begs the question of how did she get 10 years working for that company? I can only speculate. But she hit Paige with a stunner to finish that off, and then she hit a crossbody off the top rope out to the floor, wiped out Adam Page. Paige and Janela then fought up onto the stage. Janela had set 2 tables up in the aisleway. So the goal here, I assume, was for Adam Page to powerbomb Joey Janela through at least one, if not both, tables that were set up down below. Because the aisleway extended out, then there was a little staircase, and then the aisleway continued. So that was sort of the setup here. The tables were set up, at the bottom of the staircase. So he goes to powerbomb Joey Janela through the table, or tables, and not only did he not go through both tables, it looked like he barely grazed one of the tables. And he nearly killed Joey Janela. Which would not be the first person, I guess, right, in storyline that Adam Page has murdered. Back in the ring, Penelope introduced a second bag. And inside this bag were Page's cowboy boots, which if you've watched the Being the Elite series on YouTube, and many of the storylines on this show follow the events of those videos, so if you have not been watching them, you probably would be completely lost. In those videos, they've had this completely over-the-top, preposterous storyline where Adam Page murdered Joey Ryan, thus making Adam Page Jim Cornette's favorite wrestler. But then, in another episode, Adam Page's cowboy boots, because he wears cowboy boots typically, his cowboy boots began talking to him. So he began walking around barefoot. So when he saw the boots pulled out of the bag here, he freaked out. He gave Penelope a super kick. Janela had set up a table and a ladder in the ring. They fought up to the top of the ladder. And Adam Page grabbed out of the first bag that had been pulled out earlier, he pulled out a telephone, which is what he used to murder Joey Ryan. That is the murder weapon that he had used on that Being the Elite series to kill Joey Ryan. He beat him to death with a telephone. Something I have often dreamt of doing to those little bastards in the movie theater who don't get off their fucking phone when the movie starts, so I can relate. Page hit Janela with his rite of passage finish off the ladder, through the table down below, spiked him head first right through the table. Thank God it was the finish. This was sicker than the burning hammer on the ladder bridge that we saw earlier. So after the match, the lights go out. Now let me just say, as a brawl, as you know, a hardcore match, I thought this was good. But then post-match, the lights go out, and a video airs very briefly up on the big screen showing Joey Ryan's dead body, all bloodied, right, which we had seen on the Being the Elite series. But they sort of move the camera down to show his crotch, and all of a sudden we see Joey Ryan's dead body getting an erection. Then, as their way, I guess, of mocking or maybe paying homage to Undertaker's entrance, instead of druids, we had men in giant penis costumes walk out. They lined the aisleway to make way for Joey Ryan to make his entrance. Yes, Joey Ryan lives. He got into the ring. He did a dick spot, which he's made a career out of on the Independency, where he flipped Adam Page over using only his dick. And then he hit him with a super kick, and all of the giant penises carried Page to the back while the fans chanted, "Rest in penis." I cannot believe that I just said the words I said, and this was the worst thing on the entire show. Maybe of the year. I know there are going to be people, oh, Solomonster, lighten up, have a sense of humor. Look, there was a lot of goofy shit that I loved, right? I have not complained once yet about all the other goofy shit on this show. I don't like this. I think this was stupid, to put it mildly. I don't care if this was part of some long-term story they told. If Vince McMahon, you know damn well, if Vince McMahon had written a segment like this for one of his shows, he would be excoriated for it. And rightfully so. And rightfully so. This was stupid. And worse, here's what I hated worse about this. They had to rush things at the end of the show because they were running low on time. They literally made it with like 3 seconds. They got all their shit in with 3 seconds to spare. Ian Riccaboni didn't even get to do his full sign-off. They cut away. They ran out of airtime. They ran out of time at the end of the show, in part, were it not for this, the main event probably could have gone a few more minutes. I know the Okada match went long. Apparently he and Marty Scurll went a lot longer than they were supposed to. But still, you cut this out, from the entrances to Joey Ryan coming into the ring and all that. It may only be 3 or 4 minutes, but you cut this out, you've got more time for Rey Mysterio and Kota Ibushi at the end of the show. So I hated this even more because of that. We had the Ring of Honor World Champion, Black Machismo, back in the saddle. Jay Lethal defending against Flip Gordon. Lanny Poffo accompanied Black Machismo to the ring to Randy Savage's old Pomp and Circumstance music. I was disappointed we did not get a poem from the genius here, but he was not the genius. He was more Leaping Lanny, I guess, on this show. So he was tossing frisbees out to the crowd like he used to do back in the day. Then Lethal and Poffo did the old Mega Powers handshake. We had, at the start of the match, Lethal immediately jumped out of the ring. Now, Brandy Rhodes was out there with Flip Gordon because on the Being the Elite series, they've sort of developed a friendship, and Brandy has developed a fondness for Flip, even though her husband hates his guts. So she came out again to be in his corner, and immediately Jay Lethal, Black Machismo, jumps out of the ring and grabs her by the arm and takes her to the opposite side of the ring. This was, they were obviously doing the whole Macho Man Liz thing here. And he eventually chased Brandy into the ring, and Brandy just yells at him, like, I'm not Elizabeth, like, I'm not Liz. And she touched him on his shoulder, and I guess that sort of turned him back into regular Jay Lethal, or Jay Lethal Classic, I guess you might say. Later on in the match, Lanny jumped up on the apron, tapped Lethal on the shoulder, which turned him back into Black Machismo. And then he hit 3 Macho Man elbows for a near fall. Flip Gordon kicked out like Hulk Hogan and hulked up. Gordon hit the big boot. He hit a springboard sling blade. Gordon, in rapid fire succession, hit a Samoan drop. He hit a standing shooting star press, a twisting moonsault for a near fall. He went for a springboard, but Lethal caught him with the cutter, and then Jay Lethal hit the lethal injection to retain the championship. The two of them shook hands after the match. This was good. I thought this was a good wrestling match. Not the best match of the night or anything, but it's in the running. I could see where some people might look at it as maybe being there, maybe in the top 2 or 3 of their favorite matches in the card. Bully Ray ran out, as if we haven't gotten enough of him. He runs out. He attacks both guys with a chain. Lanny Poffo gets into the ring, and Bully Ray gives him a low blow. And Bully then pulls a table out from underneath the ring, sets it up inside. Colt Cabana runs down. He hits Bully with a spear, and then we have Cabana, Flip Gordon, and Jay Lethal all together giving Bully Ray the Shield triple powerbomb. And boy, did they have trouble getting Bully Ray up. Bully Ray, he's a big boy. And they had some trouble getting him up, but they put him through the table. And I just thought, obviously it was a crowd-pleasing moment, and they wanted to get a nice reaction. But I just looked at this and said, was this necessary? There's too much Bully Ray on this show for me. I thought this was supposed to be an independent show for the fans, for that audience. I can't imagine that people wanted this much of Bully Ray here on this show. I thought his appearance in the Battle Royal was fine. He played his role great in the Battle Royal. Did we really need to see him again here? We had Kenny Omega defeating Penta L0. At different points, they called him Penta L0M. They called him Pentagon, Pentagon Jr. I don't think he's having an identity crisis here. Like, legally, I'm not sure what they can and can't call him, but they called him 5 different things here on the show. I call him Pentagon or Pentagon Jr. Against Kenny Omega. This is a first-time match. This was a special attraction here on this show. Crowd was hot for it right from the very beginning. I thought that this probably this was the best match on the entire show, I would say. I would go this and then the NWA title match. And then that Battle Royal. Like I said earlier, those were probably my 3 favorite matches in that order. I thought they had a great match. I thought that this was the best wrestling match I've seen Pentagon in myself. I haven't seen all of his matches, obviously, down in Mexico or anything like that, but I've seen a lot of his work here in the States. I've seen some of his work in Impact. I've seen all of his work the last 4 seasons on Lucha Underground. I thought it was kind of weird. Right now, he is the reigning Lucha Underground champion, at least as the shows are airing on TV. I mean, I know he probably isn't at this point because these shows were taped so long ago, but they made reference a lot of times on this show to him, the guy from Impact and his work there. And I don't think there was a single mention of Lucha Underground at all, let alone him being the Lucha Underground champion. So I don't know if that was by design. I don't know. I thought that was kind of odd, that of all the things that were mentioned throughout the show, there just never seemed to be a single mention, unless I missed it. There never seemed to be a single mention of Lucha Underground here. But, it was what you would expect from a Kenny Omega match, right? A lot of V-triggers, a lot of high-impact moves. Pentagon was right there with him, and every time that Omega would hit him with a V-trigger, he would throw up the Cero Miedo sign, and Kenny would hit him with another one. And, he hit him with a power bomb. He hit another V-trigger. Pentagon hit a Pentagon driver for a near fall at one point. And in maybe the sickest move of the night, which is tough to say, given some of the stuff we saw in that Hangman Page match with Joey Janela, Pentagon gave Kenny Omega a package pile driver on the apron. And shockingly, I don't recall the announcers mentioning to us, because I certainly didn't know this. Did you? That the apron is the hardest part of the ring? I didn't know that. I'm lost unless the announcers inform me of this. I don't think they did. But that was pretty sick. You even heard the thud when Omega's head hit the apron. You heard a thud. That was pretty sick. That was pretty sick. But he recovered. It wasn't the finish. He recovered from that. He hit a spinning package pile driver on Pentagon for a near fall. He went for the one-wing angel. Pentagon countered, and he snapped the arm. Now, I'm used to seeing him do this in Lucha Underground, and when he does that, typically the person's arm is broken. But I guess he's done it in, an Impact to Sami Callihan and things like that, and I guess it doesn't break people's arms anymore, it just hurts them. Kenny Omega certainly wasn't acting as though his arm was broken, but Pentagon did snap the arm and hit another package pile driver for a very near fall. Another V-trigger by Omega. Inverted Hurricane Karana spikes Pentagon headfirst into the mat. And finally, Kenny Omega hits the one-winged angel, and there ain't no kicking out of that unless your name is Okada. And he pinned him 1, 2, 3. So, I mean, to me, the outcome was never in doubt. I guess some people I saw on my timeline saying that they were surprised. They thought Pentagon had a chance. They really made it seem like he might win. I guess there was a chance, but I don't know. Going into this, I never really doubted that Omega would win. I don't know if it's just because, he's got the IWGP title, and maybe it's something New Japan wouldn't have wanted. He didn't have the belt there with him, by the way, all weekend. I didn't see him with that championship at all. But the right guy won here, and I thought they had an excellent match. So the match is over. Pentagon is on the mat holding his arm, and all of a sudden the lights go out. Who's gonna show up? Neville popped into my head. I thought for sure Neville was gonna be standing there. I really did. I really thought it wasn't gonna be anyone from Tama Tonga or anyone like that. I thought it was going to be Neville. And when the lights came back on, there was nobody. We still saw Pentagon laying on the mat. There was nobody else at ringside. There was nobody else in the ring with Kenny. Kenny's looking around. He's like, okay, maybe it was a power outage. And he puts his arms up in the air. All of a sudden, in the background, you see Pentagon rising to his feet. And he immediately attacks Kenny Omega. I knew right away who it was. Because Jericho, the way he moves, when he throws those forearms, like when you watch somebody long enough, right, you don't have to see their face or hear their voice. Just the way they throw a move, or they sell a move, or a certain mannerism, you could tell immediately who it is. The moment that Jericho attacked him and threw that first sort of forward forearm, I knew exactly who it was. And so he's beating the hell out of Kenny Omega, and he hits a code breaker, at which point the place explodes because now everybody knows who it is. He pulls off the Pentagon mask, and underneath the mask, who is it? Sure enough, it's Chris Jericho. And people lose their shit, and they popped huge for this. He gave Omega another code breaker. He got on the mic, and he said, Kenny Omega, I'll see you on the Jericho Cruise. So this was done simply to promote this big 6-man set for the Jericho Cruise, which I believe sets sail at the end of October. I don't remember offhand. I think it's Jericho. Is it Jericho and the Bucks? I think it is. I think it might be Jericho and the Bucks against Kenny. Might be Kenny, Cody, and Marty Scurll. I could have the lineup screwed here, but there's like a big 6-man tag being promoted for the cruise. So this was not meant for any other purpose. This was not meant to promote a rematch in New Japan between Kenny Omega and Chris Jericho, which wouldn't make any sense anyway. Been there, done that. Omega's already beaten him. Jericho, in case people forgot, is the IWGP Intercontinental Champion. I know it's easy to forget because I don't even know if that title exists anymore. He sort of is holding it hostage. But to me, it doesn't really make any sense for the two of them, at least as long as Jericho has the IC title. It doesn't really make any sense for the two of them to feud again. So good on Jericho, the smartest man in wrestling. This guy finds a way somehow to always plug his shit. This was a nice big old plug for his cruise next month. And apparently Fozzy had a concert in Kansas City that night, which is why people didn't think Jericho was going to be there. Because Fozzy was supposed to be playing at the same time in a completely different city. So how could Jericho be at All In? Well, there he was. And apparently he immediately left. And I don't know if he made it or not. Last I saw, he was on his way to Kansas City trying to make his shot to do the Fozzy show. He might have still been wearing the Pentagon makeup. I would love to see if maybe he made it there and got on stage to perform. Maybe he was still wearing the Pentagon face paint at that point. But yeah, so that was a very nice surprise, even if it doesn't really lead to anything except whatever they're going to do on that cruise, which is not being broadcast anywhere, to my knowledge. I think the Jericho cruise and all the matches on the boat are just for the people paying to be on the boat. I don't think it's going to be streamed on iPay-per-view or anything like that. So if you're not on the cruise, you ain't going to see it. But it was a nice way to kind of, work him into the show, and it was a nice surprise. Even though I was kind of hoping it would be Neville. Because I think, imagine that, right? Imagine a Kenny Omega Neville match in New Japan for the championship. So we had, up next, we had Kazuchika Okada taking on the villain Marty Scurll. Now Marty Scurll, they mentioned on commentary, years ago, he was Party Marty, and, he was always the light heavyweight guy. Nobody really took him seriously. Even today, people still look at him as being that funny, entertaining guy. And he went into this match wanting to prove people wrong. He said, I'm going to be completely serious here. And this was the biggest match of his career. And he was going to beat Okada. Okada came out. Now, Okada in New Japan has been coming out looking like broken Okada. He's been coming out with balloons, acting a fool. Here, he came out to the remixed. It's the remix version of his theme song, but he came out to that. He had the Rainmaker jacket on. He made it rain. We had the Okada bucks falling from the ceiling, and people ate that shit up. I was kind of hoping that he wouldn't do the goofy shit with the balloons, and I was happy to see that it was sort of the old Okada who came out here. And I thought that the two of them had what started out very slow. Although you could say that about a lot of Okada matches, right? A lot of the matches Okada has in New Japan go 30, 40 minutes. They start very slow, and they sort of build to a big climax. I mean, you could say that about the matches he had with Omega. So it sort of followed the traditional blueprint of an Okada match, and it built into what I thought was a very good match. I disagree with some people who I saw saying, it was the best match of the night. I don't think it was. But it was a very good match, and probably one of the better matches that Marty Scurll, and certainly the biggest match that Marty Scurll has ever had in his career. He did not pull off the win. Okada did win with the Rainmaker clothesline, and you could tell at the very end, like, this match went longer than it was supposed to, because there were no replays, there was no moment where Scurll could get up and kind of get a standing ovation from the crowd. They didn't even, like, Okada even was rushed out of the ring, and you could see him walking right to the back. They knew they were running very short on time. And so, unfortunately, they had to rush things at the very end of this here. But, as a match, I thought that, it was very good. It was they traded a whole bunch of pin attempts back and forth, and we saw Okada, he hit all of his trademark spots, the drop kick off the top, he hit the standing drop kick. I love, they did the whole Rainmaker pose where the camera pans back, the zoom out, which we see them doing in New Japan all the time. He hit the tombstone, so he hit all of his trademark spots. There was, one point where Scurll had him in the crossface chicken wing a couple of different times, actually, and they were they tried to get you to believe that Okada was going to either pass out or tap out. I never bought into it, but they tried. They certainly tried. But as I said, there was one funny spot where Okada went for the Rainmaker, and Tiger Hattori was the referee, and he had been bumped, so he was down. And when Okada went for the Rainmaker, Marty had grabbed his umbrella, and he opened it, and it was an all-in umbrella. It had like a big all-in logo on it. And Marty ended up hitting the Rainmaker on Okada. So that was another moment where there was sort of a close near fall here. But again, in the end, it was Okada with the Rainmaker getting the win. I don't think the finish really here was ever in doubt. And that immediately transitioned us into the main event, because we were running low on time here. And it was the Young Bucks, Nick and Matt Jackson, two of the, founding fathers of All In, along with Cody, teaming up with Kota Ibushi against Rey Mysterio, Rey Fenix, and Bandito. I don't know if they were planning for individual entrances here. They hit Rey's music, and it took forever for him to come out. I don't know if he was on the shitter. I don't know what was going on here. I don't know if he fell asleep. It's a 5-hour show, it's pretty long. But eventually he made his way out. Kota comes out with the Bucks. Look, and by the way, Mysterio, I think they said he was dressed up as Wolverine. I couldn't tell at first, but I guess it kind of makes sense. He was dressed up as Wolverine. So that was his costume for the night. And, it was what you would expect out of a 6-man involving Kota Ibushi and the Young Bucks. And add to that the fact that they knew they were on borrowed time here and time was running out. So this was all action from the word go. This was not a match where they were going to take their time to build a story and do rest holds. None of that shit. They pretty much went right into what they needed to go into here. When Mysterio got into the ring for the first time with Kota Ibushi, they got a standing ovation. I think that may have been the first time those two shared a ring together. So we got to see them work some spots with one another. And in the end, the Bucks hit 3 super kicks in a row on Rey Mysterio, Bandito, and Phoenix. And we had Ibushi and the Bucks hitting the more bang for your buck. That was good for a near fall. Bucks hit the Meltzer driver on Bandito to get the win. I believe Meltzer was in the building, in fact. I'm sure he was very proud. And that was it. I mean, there was no, much like the match before this, there were no replays, there was no moment for celebration, there was no pyro, balloons, confetti, there was nothing. They said, thanks for joining us, and before Ian Riccaboni could even finish his sign-off, they faded out. And according to the Bucks, they literally had 3 seconds left in the show. They just barely got all their shit in. And again, you take out something like the stuff with Joey Ryan, and you could have added a few minutes, maybe not a lot of time, but you could have added a few minutes to this main event, given it some more time to breathe. But look, this is the first time these guys were doing this show. It's not like these guys are used to running a promotion, right? So for all the little, technical faults I can find with the show, because it was not, production-wise, it was not a perfect show, on the whole, all things being equal, I thought they did a bang-up job with this show for guys that have never done this before. Or at least they were smart enough to bring in the right people for it. I don't know if the Ring of Honor production crew were the ones running it. It had a very Ring of Honor feel to it. It wouldn't shock me if it was the Ring of Honor production crew who ran the show here. So on the whole, I thought it was good. You can, quibble about a camera angle here or the fact they didn't mic the crowd too great, but on the whole, I thought they did an excellent job. I don't see how anybody could watch this show and not come away from it feeling as though that they got something out of this show that they found to be fun. Because, I didn't like the Joey Ryan stuff, but that was about the only thing I really didn't like, to be honest, on this entire show. I had a lot of fun watching this show. I felt I got my money's worth. I wasn't left frustrated or angry, ready to rant when the show was over. I was pleased, with my purchase, and I don't really see how anybody who watched this show could really not be happy with something. There was something on this show I feel like that you could be happy with. And I give it a overall, like I said, 8 out of 10. If I had to rank it and give it a score, I would go as high as an 8 out of 10 on this, which is very good. So don't at me, all you people who gave it a 9 or a 10, right? Everybody has their own opinion about these things. It was not a perfect show. And I don't know if there'll be an all-in 2. I would say, given the tickets they sold, we'll see what it does on pay-per-view. I'm very curious to see what kind of buy rate this thing does. It aired on different platforms, not just traditional pay-per-view. So I don't know, you kind of have to add all the numbers up, I guess. I would find it very hard to believe a show like this would do anywhere close to 100,000, buys or anything like that. They did say it was trending on Twitter #1 worldwide at one point, which from what I saw it was, but what does that really mean, right? WWE loves to crow about that all the time. Hey, we're #1, we're trending #1. Who gives a shit? What does that really mean in terms of buys? If I had to guess, and this is a total guess on my part, if you're putting together all of the different buys and you had to come up with a number or a range, I would say that I could see this show doing in the range of 50,000 buys. I could. Even without television, right, and all that, it goes against the grain here because we've never really had an event like this before with this much hype around it that wasn't from a promotion that had television. Impact many, many years ago, I think at their the peak of their pay-per-view business, they once did a show that did about 60,000 buys. I think that was the highest they ever got. They were probably on Spike TV at that time, which, was a pretty big cable, at least at that time anyway, it was a pretty big network. So, 50 is probably even being very ambitious, but I would say, 40 to 50, I could see them pulling it off. I don't know that they would be able to do it again, but never underestimate the power of building up a first-time anything. WWE's doing that right now with Evolution, the first ever women's, all women's pay-per-view. This was the first ever all-in, the biggest independent show of all time, Madison Square Garden next year. The hype machine will be in overdrive for that as well. The first non-McMahon wrestling event at Madison Square Garden in 60-some-odd years. Two different promotions coming together to bring a show from a sold-out Madison Square Garden. They'll build that up as well. And look, I know people who bought tickets to that show, even though they wanted to go to NXT TakeOver, simply because it is the first time ever. They feel like they want to be part of something special. And no matter how the show ends up, if it ends up being a dud or if it ends up being the best show of all time, they want to be able to say that they were there for it. So there is something to that. And I would just say, never underestimate the power of doing something like that for the first time ever, because people want to feel like they're part of something special. The bigger question is, will they feel that way the second time or the third time? But for one night, I really don't see how people could find fault with a show like this. I thought it was excellent, and be sure to leave your thoughts. I'm sure this is going to go up on the YouTube channel as well. So if it does, when it does, be sure to leave your comments underneath. Let me know what you think. Maybe you disagree. Maybe you hated the show for some reason, or maybe you loved it. But be sure to leave feedback down below or hit me up on Twitter and let me know what you thought. And also on Twitter, the poll is still up. If you want to vote, thumbs up, thumbs down, didn't watch. The poll's going to be up for a couple more days. And so there is still time to hop on there at Solomonster and cast your vote for All In.